Good afternoon to each and everyone. Before anything else, I would like to introduce myself first. I am Maria Christina P. Anib, taking up Bachelor of Elementary in Education from Section 3A. The topic that we are going to discuss this afternoon is about things to consider in preparing an instructional plan. Teaching art can be challenging, especially if you do not have your own art room or if you have lack of resources and materials. The first thing in preparing an instructional plan is art supplies. Begin by having the class get settled with as many working materials at their places as possible. This is done first to avoid the need for interruptions, commotion, and moving about once they are concentrating on the task at hand. The next is opening warm-up. At this point, some teachers use beginning ritual or warm-up. It focuses attentions and tunes into art. A few minutes of contour drawing could serve as a routine warm-up and provide a chance to practice on art skill. The next is review and introduce. A short review session is always appropriate at the beginning of the session. Ask student questions about the key concepts learned in or recent lesson. See if they can recall recently studied concepts and help them understand how the ideas and skills will help them with this lesson. The next is lesson introduction. Briefly introduce the goals and issues of the lesson, focus their thinking so that ideas have a chance to emerge during the preparation time. The next is preparation for materials use. Students need to know how the materials and process work in order to be creative with their interpretations of the content and design of their work. Next is define and begin the main project. This is time to give detailed explanation of the assignment. Be sure instructions are understood and they feel comfortable about your expectations. Empower them to create. Define limits to encourage problem solving but allow individual ownership of ideas and work. The next is maintain concentration. While they are working, stay tuned to the class and be thinking of ways to keep them on task. Our teachers sense when a class is getting off track, students begin to discuss their social lives and other topics that have nothing to do with the problem at hand. The next is impulsive quick workers. Some students are impulsive and rush to finish without giving enough attention to important aspects of the work. So you should encourage them to develop more complex products. The next is deliberate and self-doubting students. Other students are handicapped by being very slow and deliberate. They may be perfectionists because they are afraid to make a mistake. Reassure them they need confidence to experiment with expressive approaches. They need to appreciate the learning that comes from mistakes and to see how happy accidents happen. The next is precautions and how to help when it is too hard. Never do any of the work for the students. Do not draw on their papers. There are other ways to help without taking away ownership and empowerment. Remember that good teaching is making the hard stuff easier and making the easy stuff harder. But a good teacher never does the work and never solves problem for the student. So if you must illustrate a point, do it on your own paper, never on theirs. The next is meaningful ending. Discuss the finished work as a way to affirm students' efforts and review the concepts learned. Be fair and inclusive. Help them to learn to analyze the effects of color, size, brightness, uniqueness, subject matter, and so on. Never allow judgmental comment like, "I don't see why anybody would use that color for." When commenting on a perceived weakness, allow only neutral questions so the student's artist may be asked to explain rather than defend a choice. So the last is closing connections. Relate the lesson to some significant works from the world of art. or help them make connections between this product and the real world. Remember that accessing your student present level of knowledge, skills, interests, and work habits is very important to validate whether your plans can work or not. And cleaning proper storage and filling should also be planned ahead so that you won't stress and about spoiled, ruined, or misplaced works. All of these are important considerations to have a more efficient and less stressful execution of your lesson. For now, let's proceed to some guidelines that you should consider in planning your art class. First is know your students, know their strengths, weaknesses, threats, and what makes them excited. Remember that each students have individual strengths and struggles in class. So as a teacher, you have to motivate them by knowing their interests and how they respond to certain themes. So you have to know what makes them excited. It is also important to identify triggers for certain behaviors, especially if you are teaching a mixed level class or children with special needs. It is important that at the beginning of the class, you know who among your students can get too excited to play with paints, scissors, pencils, and others, so you can prevent behavior problems such as lack of behavior or aggressive behavior. And if you know your students well, you can be 3 steps ahead and prepared for the base case and worst scenarios. Now let's proceed to plan for the students' safety. In teaching art, it is very important to consider the safety of your students, especially young children can get really excited or frustrated during art class. This is also the stage where they will be using some of the art materials for the same time. So make sure that you know where all the sharp objects are, and if you are teaching younger kids, make sure to keep out of reach. Also, if there is a kid who has a tendency to use scissors as a toy or gets too exciting when cutting, make sure to proceed with caution. For now, let's proceed to the last part of my report, the proper usage and storage of materials in class. First is teach how to use and store scissors properly. Second, do not over-sharpen pencils, make sure to dull the tip. Third, use non-toxic materials only in case of accidental ingestion of paints and adhesives. Fourth, beware of choking hazards such as beads, pom-poms, and small items. Fifth is beware of allergic reactions such as skin contact and inhalations of substances. And the last is be careful for wet, slippery areas due to spillage of water containers.